Hi everybody. So today I've got a video here that is specifically designed for the beginning home herbalist class, level 1 that is, and it's just an introduction to the herbal preparations. We're going to talk about some terminology and what the different preparations are, and it's just kind of to get you started thinking about botanical medicine. So this first slide is to show you some of the different things that you can do with herbal medicine. And basically one of the really great things to do is to dry herbs and save them for a later purpose. So there's different ways to dry herbs, and herbs could be any type of thing, whether they're herbs that you grow in the garden or some wild herbs or wild plants that you can use as medicine. On the top of the screen, you can see there are bundles of different things hanging upside down, and that's a really good way to dry the different herbs as you gather them, because then the air can circulate in there so that nothing gets moldy. Just across the top of the screen, we have lemon balm, we have yarrow, and the purple center flowers are lavender. There is red clover, and then on the right top is St. John's wort. So this is one method of drying and using a way that you can use the preparations later in the season. So I just want to add one other thing. There's different ways to dry things, like you can hang them from the bundles and do that. Another way to dry herbs are putting them in paper bags, and the paper bags naturally suck up some of the moisture, and then you want to keep the plants in a dark spot so that the sunlight doesn't break down the plant material. You can still maintain like all of the B vitamins and all the different trace minerals in a plant too as it dries. And then another way you can dry herbs is just laying it flat on a surface. You want to make sure enough air can circulate underneath. That's one of the keys to drying herbs. And then you could use a dehydrator if you wanted. So there's a lot of ways to dry herbs, and you will learn these as we go through the class. But just to get you started, this is a first step. So another thing that we're going to talk a lot about in the class is herbal tinctures or herbal extracts. It's the same thing. An herbal extract is just like a concentrated form of the plant material that has a really long shelf life. So when you're making the tinctures, and you'll make a lot of these in class, you'll have the opportunity to make up to 50 or more tinctures in class if you decide to. And basically, let's look at the definition of a tincture. So tinctures are solutions of concentrated liquid extracts of the herbs that preserve the plant's healing properties. So the really neat thing about these herbal extracts is you can pull out all the medicinal qualities of that herb and have it for years to come and save it on the shelf for a long, long time. Now, you don't have to use alcohol, but alcohol is the primary thing to use when you're making herbal extracts. And we'll talk more about alcohol and which ones to pick out, but I personally love to use like organic, locally made vodka because that doesn't have a lot of flavor, and you can that way utilize the plant's flavors and like tastes and those kinds of things of the plant that can create a certain chain of reactions that happen in the body. And we'll get into that as we delve in deeper. So you can use straight alcohol. You can blend alcohol and water. You can also use glycerin, but that doesn't have as long as a shelf life, only about a year. Sometimes you can extract the plants in wine or even apple cider vinegar. So those are just the solvents that pull out the medicinal qualities of a plant. And basically, the last bullet point here is alcohol dissolves the active chemical constituents out of the plant while preserving the extract for a number of years. So this is going to be a very popular way that we will do to make the botanical medicines, and you'll learn all kinds of really neat things to do with them as we go into the future months. Another term that I talk about a lot is decanting. And this is just kind of a fancy name for something really simple. So basically, once you collect your plant material and you put it in a jar and you preserve it with whether it's alcohol or something else, you let it infuse and give it some time to pull out what you need from the plant. Basically, it's about 6 weeks, whether you're using alcohol or even an oil, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then after that 6-week period, and you keep it in kind of a dark, clean area, you know, that's a little dry, not too damp. And then you just take some cheesecloth and you pour out your plant material, and you have the, you know, the infused alcohol or infused oil or whatever you're using. And then you have this remaining plant material that you can compost. It doesn't have a lot of uses for after you're done with the plant material. All of your good stuff is in your solvent or your alcohol. And then following that, you just store your preparation in a clean, dark bottle with a tight lid. And that'll lead us right into talking a little bit about bottles. So if you're making a lot of different herbal preparations, you'll probably make use of a lot of different bottles. So there's all kinds of bottles. One of the things we talk about and use frequently are the dropper bottles. And all that is, it's got a little eyedropper in, and it is distributed drop by drop. And then there are something we refer to as stock bottles. And the stock bottles typically don't have a dropper in them, just a cap on a dark bottle. And those are what you keep for storage, and you pour your individual amounts into the dropper bottles that you can use in a smaller dosage form. And then a lot of times you will find a spray top that comes in really handy. So instead of using the dropper, you just replace it with a spray top, and then you can apply it topically, or even using it as, like, say, a sore throat spray. It works really nice doing that too. So those are just a few things about bottles, and we'll talk more about that in class. If you have some dark bottles that you can collect and use and start saving up for the class for your plant material, it's a good idea to start doing that. A lot of times I'll save like supplement bottles and clean them up and reuse those. And here's just a tip that I found out myself. Sadly, one time I purchased bargain price bottles on Amazon thinking, oh, this is a great price. I can save a lot of money. But there was a significant difference in quality. And what I found is that there was a lot of evaporation out of the top of the dropper bottles. And I lost a lot of my good plant material that way. So invest in good quality bottles, and you don't have to go out and purchase any until we start meeting in person and we talk about sizes and what you want. But this is something to think about as one of the supplies that you'll be needing. Okay, another term that you should know about is infused oils. And infused oils is just another way of making another form of herbal medicine. And rather than using alcohol, you take the plant material, and it might be flowers, it might be some foliage, just depends on the situation. And you have your plant material, and you cover that with the oil, and you let it stand for another 6 weeks again. And then you strain it off, and you come up with this beautifully plant-infused botanical oil that can be used either directly on the skin or you can make it into a salve by adding beeswax. So this is another thing that you'll make a lot of. It's really similar to the herbal extract, except you just use oil. So topical applications with infused oils. Like we mentioned in the previous slide, you can take that oil that you make and you can use it for, let's just say, if you use dandelions and you infuse the dandelion blossoms in olive oil, you can use that for a really beautiful massage oil. It loosens the muscles. You can put it in a roll-on type bottle that you can apply to your skin, or you can add a little beeswax, and we'll go through the procedures on how to make that, and you'll end up with what we call a salve, and that's in the little tin that you see in the picture. All right, and this is the fun part. Once you have like individual oils made, you can combine them to create your own blends. This Harvey's Healing Salve is one of my favorite blends. I have used it, well, it's over 15 years and it's been used by many, many people. It's actually a blend of the plants that you see there in the picture. There are 5 herbs and it's infused with the extra virgin olive oil. Then it's extracted out with the decanting process that we talked about earlier. I also add a little bit of essential oils, a little lavender in this formula, and that gives it a nice scent and also offers other healing properties. Okay, so another type of herbal preparation that you'll learn a lot about in the class are herbal teas. So here in this picture, there's dried chamomile, and you just infuse, instead of with alcohol or oil, this time you're infusing it in water. And it's something that you can instantly use, whether it's fresh or dried plant material. Herbal teas are wonderful medicine. They can be very, very healing. So teas, typically, when we think of teas, we think of maybe a tea bag that you brew with a little bit of water. But as you learn to study more and more about the plants, you'll learn that there's 2 different kinds of what we call teas. You have your infusion and you have a decoction. So an infusion is what you're probably most familiar with. It's usually made from what we call the soft part of the plant, including the leaves, the flowers, grasses, or petals. And these parts are more fragile and they just need to be steeped a shorter time. So you just, you can either use like a tea strainer, you can have a tea bag, or a lot of times I'll just take the plant material and put it in a mason jar and just pour the warm water or hot water over the top. And you can let them infuse or steep for anywhere from like 5 to 10 minutes up to, 5 to 10 hours and get more medicinal properties from it. So that is an infusion. And then another thing that you'll become familiar with is something called a decoction. And all a decoction is, it's something that's made from a harder part of plant material, whether it's the roots or the rhizomes. It can be made from the barks of trees, it can be made from nuts, seeds, or even hard berries. And it's just a little bit harder to extract out the medicinal constituents because it takes a lot more to pull that out. If it's a dried type of thing, it's going to be harder to get out what you need. So what you do in a situation like this is you do a slow simmering process, anywhere from 10 minutes to several hours of just a simmering process. Typically, the decoctions don't taste as good as the infusions, but they are used for stronger medicinal purposes. So another thing we're going to be working with is something called herbal syrups. You're probably most familiar with elderberry syrup. It's available commercially all over the place and very popular these days. So we'll, study how to make your own elderberry syrup, but there's also other kinds of syrups that are pretty amazing. Other cough syrups, um, all different types of different acute situations you can use syrups for. But syrups are a traditional way to make a liquid preparation of the herbs more palatable. They taste better, and especially for kids. And typically the dosage is about a teaspoon. Doesn't take a whole lot, but it's going to be more than the tinctures or herbal extracts, which might be, just a drop or two. And herbal syrups usually include water for your base, the herbs that you use, and usually you cook it down. You start off with a bunch of water and you add your plant material, whether it's dried or fresh, and then you cook it down a bit, and then you just add a sweetener. I love to use raw honey, but you can use other sweeteners. Okay, the next thing that you are going to learn a lot about are herbal vinegars. And this is something that I really love to use. Herbal vinegars can be used both internally, you can consume them, or you can use it externally. A lot of times it's made kind of the same way. You think about the same kind of steps where you take your plant material, whether it's dry, but typically fresh is best. And then you macerate your herbs by adding apple cider vinegar. So you take your plant material, put it in a jar, add your vinegar, and let it sit. And the vinegar is pretty interesting, and you always use raw apple cider vinegar. Vinegar extracts the vitamins and minerals, especially calcium and iron. It helps pull that out from the plants and just makes it more bioavailable to the body. And you can really get some delicious tasting vinegars. A really good example is like lemon balm vinegar. It makes excellent salad dressings. You can add it to a little bit of water, or put a little bit and add a fair amount of water, maybe a teaspoon per 16 ounces, that kind of thing. And then you can end up with some good medicinal qualities by doing that. Favorite of mine to use is in the springtime is to gather up some dandelion roots and extract that out in vinegar. And that's really helpful for boosting the liver and decongesting that. So another thing we're going to be making is called infused honey, and it's the same general concept. You take your plant material and you pour honey over the fresh herbs and you infuse it for either a few days or a few months. And the honey does the same thing that all of the other types of preparations do. They just pull out the medicinal qualities of the herbs, and then you can use that for a variety of things. A lot of people love herbal honeys for like sore throats or coughs, where it kind of soothes the throat. And kids tend to like this, and it makes it useful for people of all ages. So another thing that you will find the herbs really, really helpful for is when you're using hydrotherapy. And just think of hydrotherapy as another way your body can absorb some of the wonderful medicinal qualities of the herbs. So you can infuse your bath water with different herbs by either making a tea or a decoction, an infusion or decoction, and adding that to the bath water. Using the bath salts are great, whether it's Epsom salt or any other kinds of salts. Those are really nice. And then if you add the herbs in too, that's a really incredible way to give your body that extra boost. You can do a full body bath, you can do a foot bath, a hand bath, or something called a sitz bath. So that is just another way that we can use herbs. And that concludes our basic introduction about herbal preparations.